last one did. Oh, okay. I know sometimes it isn't. I'm just using this little speaker here, which may be the problem. I also think it varies a little bit depending on the connectivity. So if the internet drops at all, it pops out of. All right, so let's go back.
Have you tried recording on Pinapto?
I haven't, but I may try. I actually don't like Panapto, but I will do it just because it's a flash thing and it's totally insecure. But if it works better, maybe I should use it. So I'll try. But I'll have to experiment with it a little before I try to do class. I might ask Bill. I know he does it.
Yeah.
The other thing with Panoptica, although it's probably not a bad thing totally, is it's only available through Campus. Right, so there's no outer set of them where you can watch it without logging into Canvas. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the Visual Studio. Actually, real quickly, I might show you just a GitHub. So if I do GitHub SP Conger, and repositories, the very last repository is probably, yes, the entities example from last week. And all the code is here. And actually, if you could download it as a zip file. I guess I'll do that. I'll download the zip. And did it download? I'm not sure if it is. There it goes. Slowly. Hopefully not too slowly. I was just going to show you how to open it. You should just be able to open the virtual machine. You had it before, right?
Well, no, since Tuesday.
Yeah. So you do that. So you haven't actually added
Yeah, because I wasn't here on Tuesday.
before, so open the virtual machine. Find it on the desktop. Open that file right there. The lock file. Anyone else need to have copies? Password is and I'll show you this, and then I will I'll help you get the databases. So, and one of the reasons why the sound may fade in and out is that I'm wandering away.
No, I mean, the sound, you could hear it very well, but it just,
Oh, it was really bad.
it was bad. It wasn't more so because you weren't near the mic.
Okay.
There was just a weird sound.
Huh, I wonder what it was. We'll see if this one works, and then if it's really bad, I'll see about going to the Panoptica. So I've got it. I'm going to open it in folder. You don't have to. If you did what we did last week, you don't have to do this. I'm just downloading this from GitHub to show you how. So it comes down as a zip. The other, if you really know what you're doing, if you want, you can branch it. Right, you could branch it to your machine. But I just downloaded it as a zip. I'm going to extract it. So I'm going to extract all. One of the things to know is, and I'm going to, instead of downloads, I'm going to do just the desktop. And then I will extract it. Okay. So I'm just showing you that you can take these and you can download the zip, or you can clone it. And then I will file, open website. Slowly. I hope this isn't going to be this slow all day because I have a lot to cover today. Okay, so you're in. I'll get you in the start stuff in a moment. So I'm going to go to the desktop. There's the entities example. Now, one of the things that happens when you use the Windows zip is it creates a folder inside of a folder, and you need to go to that inside folder. If you open it from the outside folder, nothing will work. And then I'm going to do open. It should open. Give it a moment. So if I look in the Solution Explorer, boy, everything is, I'm not sure if it actually opened yet. Give it a moment more. It's frozen. As I said, I hope this isn't a pattern for the day, because I got a lot to do. You're updating. This is 100%. From last time, you did it last time. You should be able to just say open website.
Yeah, that's.
So you want to go down to Documents, Visual Studio, Websites. Okay, so we need to get. So. We can do this. Okay, here I am there, and it's loaded. Okay, so that's what we did, but it's down from here. So let me walk through kind of what we did. And then, as I said, we'll continue. And then I'll come get those databases when you're ready for them. So remember under the app code, we did the wizard. We did the, and we'll do it again for other things, but let's see, I actually don't want that one. Don't be so slow. I want this one, I think. Come on, you can do it. Yeah, so we downloaded, we got the designer, right, from the database. So we made our connection to the database. These are all the tables. Basically, to run that, all you have to do is right-click and do add, and then you add a entities, ADO entities data, right? It should all be here if you did it last time. Are you having trouble loading? So go to Visual Studio. The only other thing we did is we added, so this was all in the wizard. And then we added a default ASPX. And as I said, we'll run that wizard this quarter. We're going to run it several times. So the ASPX file just has the HTML and I want it to scroll down, that little table with the login. This is going to take forever if it starts turning wheels every time I click. All right, so go to file. Actually, yeah. So first letter, first name. Did I do your whatever your password? Because I won't work to change it. So try it. Zero. Yes. So you're gonna have to set up. Choose master. Okay. So use it.
Yeah, that's what I was. Okay, so I'll
So
go ahead and
GitHub.com. So what you want to download? Choose example that we're doing right now. You can do the same thing. Okay, so questions on this part took me a while, and I may have to. So we just did, to look at it in design, we just did a simple password. Please don't take forever. Okay, so there it is. So just a text in a paragraph, a text box, a button, and a link that's going to receive any information that we have, right? So I'm going to run it real quick, and then we'll move on to the next parts. But unless you guys have questions. So it's going to take a while to set you up, but I will. All right, so slowly, slowly. Everything is slow today. So do you guys remember any of the passwords? Yeah, I know, but what was there was M. Let me look, see if I can get there. I may have to kill it to get a password. Although I know another way I can get it. There's also the SQL Management Studio on here. I was kind of avoiding using it, but sometimes it's useful. Oh, come on. I just want to, was it Mary?
It's Mary G, I think.
Yeah, Mary G, and then it was, what was the password? Just Mary Pass or something like?
Yeah.
Let me try it. Mary G,
It's password.
Mary Password.
Yeah.
It has its own lowercase.
Why isn't it working? Oh, it's still thinking about it. So this is, let me close this. Damn, everything is spinning and slow. So it says welcomed. And we also have the 2, which is her key, right? So let's look at the code behind the login. So it worked. Thank you for remembering the. So the other part of this, I'm going to stop it. We made that, and then in the Solution Explorer, I'm going to go to the SPXCS, the code that we wrote. I don't know if I can go in, but basically, we're the person key is a variable, isn't yet, right? But we just gathered it. The book review data entities. Anybody remember what that is? Not a clue. It connects to the data entities thing that we did. You know that wizard that created all the classes that map to the database? This is the connection. This is what it's called, book review DB entities. When you do the community assist one, it'll be called community assist data entity, or just community assisted. It's always the name of the database plus the word entity. Now, if you have to run the wizard more than once, it might be like book review DB entities 1. You know, it just adds a number to it if you do it several times. All right, so I just called it DB. This connects to database entities. In the DB, we copied that, use the stored procedure. If you want to see the stored procedure, I can show it to you. But basically what the stored procedure does is it takes the username and password, hashes it, rehashes it, and see if it matches the hash in the database. If it does, it returns 1. If it fails, it returns -1. All right. How would you know that? Somebody would have to tell you. It would have to be in some documentation they gave you if you're making a website talking to the database. Does that make sense? It's not something you would just know. But anyway, because a -1 is a failure, I'm saying if it's not a failure, if it's not equal to -1, we want to get the key because we're going to need it for a session variable. I tried to get the stored procedure to return the key, but I never could. It just returns a 1 or -1. So this is a type of query called link, and we're going to see a bit more of it. But this creates a variable called uKey. The var looks like JavaScript. It's a little bit like it, except that they say it's more strictly typed, and it's not containing just a single value necessarily. It can contain a whole body of value. It could contain the whole table, right? But in this case, it only contains one value. So it's a little bit like upside down SQL. So from K is it's invented at that moment. I did it as K because I was getting a key, but you can name it whatever you want. It is literally just a variable. We're not declaring it as a type, it is being declared right there. DB again is our database connection. Reviewers is a collection of review of. So one of the things that it does when you do the entity review, single review singular is like data. Even though this is actually the name of the table in the database. Reviews is a collection of these list of review objects. Does that make sense? Sort of. So that when we say that reviewers, we're looking for the whole list of reviews, all the reviews. Where, and then gives a criteria for that. In the K, we're using that because this is the individual instance from reviewers, where the reviewer username is equal to whatever our username is in the text box. Or it wouldn't valid passing the box in, but I was just trying to be fast. And then we're selecting from this reviewer object, we're only selecting the reviewer key, and we're getting the first or default. In case it returned more than one example, we're only taking the first one. That's basically what that says. And there should be no way that that would return more than one value. And then we bring the U key to the key that we have up here. And I had to cast it to an integer, because in the database it's an integer. In here, it's just sort of an object. Object is kind of generic, anything, right? So you have to cast it to the kind of object that it is, which is integer. Then I stored that in a session, which we haven't used yet, but there is a session on the, whenever somebody navigates to the page, it creates a session for them. And actually for the whole site, because when we move to another page, the session will still be active. And then right now I just said welcome, and I did the plus key to string because I want to make sure that it was getting the key. In real life, I would get rid of that part, and I will do so now. Does that make sense? Questions on that? That's kind of still reviewing what we did last time. This is if it's not a valid, if it is -1, then say invalid logic. Questions? Does that make sense? It's okay if it doesn't, then you can ask. I know for a couple that weren't here, I'll have to catch up on that. Okay. And again, the code for this is on GitHub. If you did it here last time, you probably don't need it. That's as far as we got last time. I'm going to add one more thing to this page before we, yeah. You're kind of redoing it, but with Community Assist. So this will be a pretty good template for that. With a little bit of a caveat, so in Community Assist, when we do a registration, the registration's a lot longer. Here it only has their name and their email and a couple of things. In the Community Assist, it's their name, address, and contact numbers. So there's more.
Did you create the wizard doing GitHub?
Well, so actually for the wizard, you just do it here, right? You just right-click. I'll start it, but I won't run it. And you say add. And it's in my list now because we already did it. But you add the ADO data entity model. And I'll click it. As I said, I'll cancel it. I'm just going to leave it as model because I'm going to cancel it. It says that it needs to go into the data. And we'll say yes. And then it goes through. Remember, all the rest of the wizard, we did it from database. We picked our tables. You know, it's fairly self-descriptive if you actually read it while you go through it. Right? And that's something I would advise. So none of this is going to stick if you just do the assignments, and I'm just telling you that. You know, basically, if you ever get a chance to play with it, create your own websites and play with the data entity things, and just read the dialog boxes. Also read the errors when I see there's one error, but I think it's not an actual error. It tells me that I need to create a new solution file, so when I save it, it will. Does that help? Is that an answer? So particularly because of the real close model, so hopefully you can kind of follow this. Doing it again with something slightly different, that's actually how I learned to do things, is I'll look at an example in a book or a magazine or online, and I'll do it, and then I'll vary it. I'll make changes to it or do something like it, and it helps it to stick, eventually. Okay, so I'm going back to the default ASPX. I'll go into the source. I just want to add one thing here. And it'll be down below the table. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a link button. Although you could do this, I can't see where I want to add it because, okay. You could do this without doing a link button. You could do a regular ahref link if you wanted, just a hyperlink, because that's actually all I'm going to do here. I'm going to change the code to say register. So if you don't have a login, you can register. And then I'm going to do one other thing here. I'm going to say that the postback URL, is that what they call it? Yeah. Postback URL. Let me break the line so it's all on screen. Equals register.aspx. Now, it's not going to, there isn't a register ASPX yet, but that's what we're going to have, right? Let me get her started downloading. Okay, so basically what we have is a link button to another page. It's basically behaving like a hyperlink. You guys need a second on that? I didn't name it. I left it link button 1. Postback URL tells the page where it's going to go. And then I changed the text in between the tags to register. Just real quickly on the design. It just looks like a hyperlink. And that's how it'll behave. Typically, when you have to log in, you have a register page in case you can't log in, right? So the other thing we need to do is in the Solution Explorer, I need to add another web form. And this one I will, because I will call it register. Right, because that's what I said I was going to go to. So you guys okay with that? So it gives us a new web page called register. There's now a register. So it has this register ASPX and register CS. So title, give them titles, but I'll do a real quick H1 register. Now, in the form, do you guys want me to do a table to store this? Sometimes when I do that, people have lots of trouble getting the table to work right. Or just put it in ugly. Table would make it prettier. What if you go in ugly? Why? go with the table. These are if you've done them in HTML, yeah. The farmer page. Which part do you need? Just what? Right. So this is a built-in attribute you get from the drivers. This is register.asp, which is, you might know, so the way I create the page again, up here, add web form, and then I name it. And yeah, it doesn't automatically add anything. That would be nice, but no. All right, so I'm going to go back to register. I'm going to back over so I have a little. A table control. Because it makes the coding more complicated. The table control creates these an ASP.NET table, but every cell is its own object, and so what you have to do is you have to, when you want to refer to something in an object, you have to find it in the table. It's just so much easier. It makes it a little more the other one, but if you wanted to explore it, you could. So a table typically will have, again, just a table row. Inside the table row, I'm going to give it a cell that says, and database. Do I still have, if I look at the Server Explorer, yeah, I still have view. So I just want to look at I'm going to look at the stored procedure because ultimately we're going to pass it to a stored procedure. And there's a new reviewer. And I just want to make sure what fields it's asking for. So this one, it's asking for the username, first name, last name, email, and password. When you do the community assistant, I might show you that there's like 15 of them as opposed to 6, 7 of them, because there's the street and the address, the city and the state and the zip. Fill in all these boxes, but there are stored procedure wants them all. And again, if you ever want to just look at, I think you can just, if I right click on this, can I script it? I'll show you sometime how to look at those if you really want to see how the stored procedures were written. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is the username. And I'm going to make another cell. And I'm going to put a text box in there. So I'm going to go back to the toolbox. And I'll put a text box to enter their name in. And it breaks. So I could certainly break this up a bit if I want to try to get it all on screen. It's a pain. All right, so I have a text box. I'm actually going to add a third one, and I'm going to leave it empty. There's a reason I'm doing that, because when we do validation, I'm going to put the validation mode thing in that third cell. Does that make sense? So we've got a cell that's a prompt, got a cell for the text box to enter it, and then we've got an empty cell where later we'll put in some validation messages. You don't have to do there's ways to do the validation messages where they're not right beside the thing, but if you want them there, it's nice to have a place for them. So, table row, we're going to have several rows, right? We're going to have a row for every single field that was over there. So I'm going to go back to the Server Explorer so you can see those, and so I can see them. So we need first name, last name, email, and password. The easiest way to do that is to copy from table row to table row, right? You've got with the 3 cells inside of it, and just copy that and paste it. Change the words instead of username. Change this to first name. The other thing you can do and should do is I'm going to change the name of the text box. I'm going to change this to user text box, and this one to first name text box. The trouble is if you leave them as just text box 1, 2, 3, when you're trying to deal with them in code, it's really unclear what you're talking about, and it's really hard to figure out. So it's good to name them.
You always leave it on that.
You don't have to.
Okay, cool.
I'm just trying to be really clear, so I'm being very verbose, okay? But you do not have to write text box. And generally, I don't with most variables. I don't say what kind of variable it is, but with the form ones, the form controls, I usually do so I know what I'm dealing with. You could just do txt, or you could do TB, or you could do, or you could just leave it out and just say first name. That's fine.
Yeah.
All right. So having done that, I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to paste the same thing again, and instead of first name, this time it'll be last name, and I'll change it to last name text box. It's good to develop a naming convention, right? Something where it's consistent so you know what things are when you deal with them. It doesn't have to be this wordy, but it's good to have a naming convention. Having done that, again, I'm just going to paste again and change it to email. And I'll change it to email text box. And then I'm going to do it again, and we'll just do it with a password. I'm going to do a couple of things with it. I'm going to do password, and I'm going to change this to password text box. You can also, if you want, remember the text mode. You can change it to a password text mode, which means that it will put the little dots over it instead of the word, which would be a good idea if you want. I'm going to do one other. I may do that when we're done with it. But I'm going to do another one, and I'm going to say confirm password. And I'll call it confirm text box. Okay, so just to walk through from the top, and then there's one more cell which will be with the button, right? So I've got start the table. We have one row with name, user text box, and in an empty cell. And then I did exactly the same, just copied it for the first name, last name, email, password, and confirm. And just to show you what it looks like, I'm going to go back to design, and this is what we've got so far. See, it looks neat. I mean, that's the table makes it look neat. You can do the same thing with CSS, although when I do a form, I still think it's a legitimate use of a table. Some would argue. Now, there's an empty cell along the side, but you can't, but we'll be using those for some of the validation messages. The last thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it in source, is I'm going to add one more row. And I'm just pasting what I had there before, except that instead of username here, or some kind of text, I am going to add a button in between those TDs. I'll just call it submit button. And I'll change the text to submit. And then I think instead of a text box, although you could leave the text box if you want, I usually prefer a label. The difference between a text box and a label, I think I've told you before, is that a label is, you can't type into it. It's read-only. I called it error label because that's what I'm going to use it for, is if there are any errors, I'll put the message there. And that's it. That's the whole form, except for the validation, which I'll do next. Questions on that? You guys got it? I'll give you a minute. And again, it's the pattern that matters, rather than copying exactly what I'm doing. It's, you know, the row and the, you always have a prompt in the text box. Yeah.
I think connect to the server.
Right, let's try how far do you go? Yeah. Sometimes I don't know why. Sometimes I restart or something. So it's, all right. Anyone still need time with this? And if you don't want to use the table, you could just do the prompt in the text box and a break symbol or something, right? It just, okay, so that's what we've got. All right, so one of the things I want to show you is down here. You know, there's a lot of other controls. There's a data control, but there are also these validation controls. And I just want to show you those real quickly. So I'm clicking the little arrow to do those. So there's a compare validator. We'll actually use that for the password and confirm. There's a range validator, which will allow you to say that the value has to be within a certain range. The range value validator actually also lets you determine if it's an integer or a double. You can actually use it to make sure that it's the right data type. Regular expression validator does apply some regular expressions to the text box. Required field validator makes a field required. And then you can do a summary. If you don't want the messages along the side like we're doing, you can do a summary and they'll all be down below. Couple of things about these. So you can do everything that these controls do yourself with JavaScript, particularly jQuery. And in fact, Microsoft has made it so they won't work now. They're just using jQuery. So we have to download jQuery real quick. So I'm going to show you how to do that in the assignment here. You guys ready? I'll do it a couple of times, I think. So I'm going to do, we don't want add this time. We want manage NuGet packages. So over here, it's under, I right-clicked on the project and then manage NuGet packages. And let's see if I can remember the name. Oh, yes, I have to save. So let me save all. And remember, I said it hadn't saved my solution, so I have to save my solution. Then I should be able to do it. Right click, manage NuGet packages. All right. And we want to browse, I believe. And we want to see if I can remember.
I don't have those now. Those aren't there.
So you have to hit browse. Did you hit browse?
Oh, okay. I see.
I believe it's ado.net. jQuery? No, so ado.net. What? I know, but there's a different one that I want. Let me look here for the ado.net. Did I say in the assignment, would I have been so nice? I'm pretty sure it's ado.net. Is it jQuery script manager? All right, so let me look and see if I wrote it in the assignment.
It should be ASP.
Is it ASP?
ASP.
ASP.NET? Oh, okay. So .jQuery? Let's see, just see ASP.NET. And I can probably find. Dot. There it is. Thank you. So it's ASP.NET Script Manager.jQuery. So I did ASP.NET.s. Thank you. So it's not ADO.NET, it's ASP.NET. You want to install it? Yeah, so ASP.NET, not .NET, but ASP.NET.ScriptManager.jQuery. If you don't download it, those controls will all complain. They'll all throw errors. Now notice that there's now a bin folder and a scripts folder. I think the bin might have been there before. The scripts folder. And I'll just open it. We can ignore them once they're there. But there are all the jQuery ones. That being said, as I said, if you wanted to not use these controls and just use the jQuery directly, you certainly could. You could write to JavaScript if you want. You might actually have better control. So
once installed.
yeah, hit install. Mine says uninstall now because I installed it. So ASP.NET Script Manager.jQuery, and it adds all the jQuery scripts, and then the controls will work. I'll show you how to do those here in a second. As I said, there's lots of pieces to this. It could drive you nuts. There's so many different pieces. Let me know, anybody not get it? I mean, other than the people downloading the virtual and things. Everybody's got it okay? All right. Once you've done that, and if we need, we can go back and do this again. I could delete them and reinstall them, you know. So, I'm going to add these controls to the form, and we could do it in. Typically, I do it in the source, but you could do it in. So I did split. Let's just do source. The reason I don't do split is that my screen is too cramped anyway. So and the thing to do is to think about what makes sense. So the username, I'm going to get the toolbox up though. The username should be required, right? And if you look at the validation controls down here, there is a required field validator. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that and drag it into that empty cell. I'm going to break the message up just to get it on screen. You don't have to do this. Okay, so there's a couple of things. I'm not actually going to name this, although you should, because I'm never going to refer to this in code. So the default name will work. But I am going to change the message. I'm going to say user name is required. You can make whatever message you want. I'm also going to press enter in a space, and we have to tell it which control to validate. So I'm going to say equals, and this will be user text box. Right, so it's this control. It's the ID for the control. It needs to know what control it's validating. Putting it beside it isn't enough. It actually needs to know. So this user text box, that's what I write in here. And that's actually all I need for this validator, because it will now make it so that this is required. And I'll show you what it does real quickly. You don't have to run it, but I'll just show you. The button, which right now the button doesn't do anything anyway, but when you click the button, it will not execute what's in the button until you have something in that field. And then we're going to do a couple of the others. We'll do a regular expression one on the email, just to show you a regular expression. So if I submit the button right now, come on, I know there's nothing in the button, but it should do the validation. Slowly, slowly. So how long will I spend this time? Will it let me kill this? No. It's going to say it. Sometimes it's faster if you build it first. Because I think what it's doing is it's trying to process all the scripts we've added and everything and build them into the executable. So if you build it first, it's faster usually. It may time out. So this may have been a mistake to demo it. Usually it happens instantaneously. Yours worked, I can see.
Yeah.
What is it doing? It's taking so long. So a couple of things. The message will appear here because we put it in that cell. Again, that's not always what you want, but you can do that. And you can also apply like CSS to it to turn it red or something if you prefer. Right now it's just black. Oh, come on. Can I? So it's totally frozen. it's a good opportunity to check on the progress. He was doing pretty good. I was happy for a while.
Steve,
Yeah.
So which one should I download for this? Which?
So there's your Visual Studio. Are you in Visual Studio?
No. I need to download into the Visual Studio.
Right, and you need to be in the virtual machine. Are you in the virtual?
So I just want to do it later, but I know the place is going.
So it's, you go to the right.
Okay, I will go into check.
So you go into, you right click on the project and you choose manage Linkit, and then you want the ASP.NET jQuery.
Yeah, that's the website I got there.
You got there.
I got that, but I don't know which edition should I download.
Oh, I don't know if it has any additions.
Okay. Yeah, running the voting machine will tell me.
Okay.
That's fine.
Come on. I don't want to kill this. I'm not even getting where I can go up and bring down the virtual machine. Hey, what was that, a minute, 2 minutes later? I have no idea what took so long. All right. Still frozen a bit. There it goes. Okay. Let me kill this. So I'm going to do another first name. Do you want to make it required? Usually first names I don't require. Last name you might want required. And again, you can just do, just to give another, if it will let me. I'll drag in a required. When it will let me, I will drag in one. I'm frozen again.
So you want to make the last name required?
Yeah, you can make, so the last name can be required. And again, if it will let me, shoot, what is it doing that it is so slow? Yeah, I think I might just for, okay, so now, and again, what you want to do with this, so I'm just going to break it up so that all the fields are on separate lines. You want to change the error message. So I'm going to say last name is required. And then inside the hash, that you want to add a control to validate. And you need to say what it is, which will be, oh, I did this on email, but we can make it required. Email text box. I meant to put that on the last name. So let's, I'm going to change that to email. And I could do that. I could actually, I'm going to just copy this and put it under last name. And we will just make it, why is it giving me the error there? Oh, I didn't get the close. Okay, so I'm going to say last name is required. And I'm going to say that this is for last name text box. Okay, I'm going to do one more with the email, and then I'll do the compare, and it'll be done with the validations. I don't want to spend forever on them. Does this make sense so far? So in the same cell for the email, I'm also going to bring over a regular expression validator. And I'm going to break it up just again so you can see it all. I'm going to say for the message, invalid email. And I'm going to also give it the control to validate. And then I'm going to do something else. Oops. Email text box. Okay, so right now it doesn't look any really different than the required. And I did these both in that last cell, so there's 2 messages in that one cell. But I'm going to go, and I'll do this again. Do you guys need a minute with that? I'm going to go get the regular expression. Unfortunately, to do that, I have to go to the design. But I'll give you a second to get that. So these are both in the cell. One is that it's required. The other is that it is, my brain is gone, that it's not a valid email. But we haven't done the actual regular expression yet. If you know regular expressions, you could write it here. But I'm going to assume you don't know. And I'm going to go to design. I might want a space in there between them. When I do this, if I go to the solution, properties. You guys have properties? So properties, that's not the right properties. I want it selected. Properties. There we go. There's a thing, validation expression on mine is way down here as a property. And your invalid email has to be selected. When you click on that, it has this tiny little button with 3 dots. Microsoft loves these little 3-dot buttons that tell you nothing. So this is in the invalid email selected, properties, validation expression, down under behavior. There's a little 3-dot button, and I can help you get there if you need. When I click that, it gives me a list of different standard expressions that you can use. And for this one, we're going to go down and we want an internet email address. And this is the regular expression for an email address. And
Is
then
it
if you,
JavaScript?
what?
Is that JavaScript?
No, it's regular expressions. Has anybody done regular expressions? They match a pattern for the words. You can force it to be into a certain pattern. What this will do is it'll force it to be in an email pattern. Now, but emails are variable. Like my one for the school is Stephen.Conger, so it can have a dot. This says that you can have a word plus you can have a dash or a dot. Okay, and then you can have another word, and then you need an @ sign, right? And then you can have a word, and then you can have a dash or a dot, and another word, possibly another, I think this dot is required, and then another word, actually I'm not sure, yeah, another word like edu or something like com. You can also have another dot there, we don't see that very often, but for like England or a country code. You don't see that very often, but it is a legitimate part of some emails. So it has to allow for every possible variation of a legitimate email, but it doesn't, it requires the @. And if you have any other characters besides a dash and a dot, it will complain.
And also, how do I get my properties out?
So if you don't have a properties window, let's look on the side. No. So there's a couple of ways you can do it. We can view properties. Yeah, view properties, or you can run quick on it and view properties. So I'm going to add this. And again, if you get really good at like JavaScript and stuff, you learn a few of these regular expression things. you can apply them through JavaScript, but they're not technically JavaScript. Does that make sense? And then actually in C# there is a whole library devoted to regular expressions. So when I look back at the source now, it's added. So it's added a validation expression. And again, you could have written that in if you knew what you were writing. But yeah. So I'm not actually, so if I were to separate these, I could probably do a, oh, that can't go there. It has to go between them. But I'm not sure. Yours isn't showing up at all. Do you have it in the box in the cell? Yeah. In operating space, it's just being separated. If you can't find it, let me know. I'll look and see. So I'm gonna, Lord help. Well, so anyway, this will make like a like an email. I'm gonna go back to design, click on that one again. Look at properties. I'm just going to do this again to show what other things are there. There's French phone number, French postal code. There's a Japanese phone number, internet URL, lots of phone numbers, Social Security, U.S. phone number, U.S. Social Security number, U.S. zip code. So there's all those different things. And also at the very top, there's custom if you want to enter a custom one. Because you can literally match any kind of pattern. That's the whole point of these. But all right, the last one I'm going to do. How are we doing for time? Not terrible. So I would do, for the password, I would make it required. And I'll flip that down so that we can see it all. So this is in password, so I'm just going to say password required. And then I also, as always, have to do control to validate, which will be the password text box. And then the last one I want to do is just to show you. Do you guys have that one? It's just like the ones up above. And then the last one I'm going to do is the confirm. And for that, I want to do a compare validator. You can make it required too, but I just want to show you how to compare. So the error message will say doesn't match. Our passwords don't match. And then I'm going to add a couple of other things. So I'm going to do control to validate as confirm text box. And the there's one other thing you have to do with a compare validator, is you have to say what control you want to compare. and that will be the password text box. I haven't put the password mode on these, text mode, so they'll be just plain text, but we can add those later. And this is all I'm going to do. These are all the control, the validations.
Did you
I'm
make
going
that
to do.
required also?
I didn't, but I probably should. You want me to make it required? So in this last thing, I'm going to put it up here. Actually, the easiest way, I'm going to copy this one. Oops, I don't want the TDs though. So I'm just going to put the required in there too. When you do your assignment, I'm not too worried about, I just want to see you use one or two of these. I'm not too worried about you doing everything. But in real life, you always want to validate your text boxes. When you have text boxes that talk to a database, it's dangerous. All right, so it's a good thing to make sure that they're not trying to write a bunch of code in the text box to run past to the things. Now, in .NET, there's a lot of controls. The text box itself won't allow certain symbols, which can be a pain if you need those symbols. The other thing is the stored procedure that we're using, it has some type controls also. So it's not as dangerous as it could be, but it's always a good idea to validate open text boxes. So I'm going to show you how this works, and then we'll do the code on the button, which is actually really simple. And then we will do the very last part. Yeah. The only thing I can think of is I would set. Yeah. Oh, I don't care. It's not good enough. I thought you did that yesterday. Yeah. Oh, it's just whatever order you copy them in.
Okay, but I don't have all the time.
Oh, so I don't know. So I have required 5. What did I do as required? Again, I'm not too worried about you having exactly the same things. All I want you to know is the gist of the controls. So what do I have? I have username is required. Last name is required. Email is required, and regular expression. If you want, maybe get rid of the required on the email and just do the regular expression and see if that works. And then I have required for the password and required for the confirm. Again, it doesn't matter too much. So I should probably put a space between those two.
User must know personal email and password.
Where is register? Source. Don't have to do this, but I'm going to do a non-breaking space between here. This is purely for aesthetics. It just breaks a space. It just creates a space between the two control messages. So when I look at the design, there's a space between these two things. And you could make these red and all sorts of things. Hopefully this won't kill everything. I'm going to run this, and then we'll go to the code part. So if I hit submit, see, I get all those messages. What tool? All right, so if I do a first name, oh, that's a username. Joe user. Joe Smith. All right, and then I'm going to do an invalid email. So it hit required right now, but I'm going to do an email, but I'm just not going to make it valid. Email at, and I'm just going to leave it at that. See how invalid email pops up? So let's do Joe. Then when I come down, that one is there. So let's do two passwords. Let's do Joe Pass. And then I'm going to do it with like Joe Pass lowercase. And then it says passwords don't match. When I click submit, the messages go away. It didn't do anything because the submit it reloads the page, but it doesn't work. We haven't put any code there yet. Now, and because I didn't put the password mode here, it just stays as plain text. So we can adjust that later. Sometimes when you're developing, it's nice to leave it as plain text. And then before you distribute it, you put in the password mode. So did your guys' work okay? So those are just, whoa. Oh, yeah, that's right.
Can you show your folder real quick for your source?
Sure. Which part?
I just want to see how you simple out there it is.
Yeah, I just put a non-breaking space. This isn't ASP.NET. This is just HTML.
Yeah, I just never mind.
Yeah.
Like
Are we ready for the code? Did it show if you took the other one out?
Yeah, I redid it. I just redid it.
Oh, okay.
So I changed the what's provided in the properties.
Oh, okay.
The orders.
You can, yeah. And again, it's not super important. It's just a demo for this. But so typically what we want to do is double click the submit button, right? That gives us the code and the method. Anybody need more on this before I do that? So what we're going to do is we will, if you think about it, we just want to connect to the data entities just like we did before. we have a stored procedure that I showed you, which is USP new reviewer. And then we're just going to pass those fields through. And we can pass them directly, or it might be better to just do, so we had we could do things, if you want, you could do like string user equals user text box dot text. I could pass the text boxes directly, but this is probably a better strategy, a little bit more wordy. So I'm going to do string, let's just say last, lowercase l, for the last name, or first, we did first, right? First equals first name, text box dot text. So I'm just assigning what's in the text boxes to variables. So last equals last name text box dot text. It's important not to leave out the dot text. And then we had email. And then there was just one more, right? The password. And you can take this from the password or from the confirm. Might be good to take it from the confirm. So I've assigned all of those things to variables. It'll make the rest more readable. Again, you don't have to do this, but it's probably a good practice. I'm going to so this is book review DB entities, right? I'm going to do it as DB equals book review DB and equals new. Okay, so that connects us to our data classes, all the stuff we dragged onto that form. And then really we just got, I'm going to do int result equals, and I'm going to say db dot, and if we go down to the use, there's USP new reviewer. And if I open that, it tells me what needs to go in here in what order, right? And pretty much they're in the order that we have. So wondering what I took over. What?
Is it something like functions?
It's like a function. So a stored procedure in SQL is basically a set of commands that are put together to execute as one. When you drag them onto the designer, it actually turns them into a method or a function. Okay, so it's behaving exactly like a function here or a method. And it gives you, as I said, let the IntelliSense help you, because it tells you what has to go in here in what order. So I could just, so first thing it wants is the username. Second thing it wants is the first name. As I said, we did them in pretty much the same order. And then the email, and then the password. Okay. So these variables replacing those arguments. This is what you will need to do with Community Assist. The thing that will be a pain is that it go in the right order, it doesn't write to the database correctly. And you have to pass everything in, even if you don't put something in the text box. Because they all have to go through. Some things will accept nulls. So some nulls are okay, but generally just need to do these. So the result So if result, and I need a parentheses, and I'm going to do just like before, not equal -1. So if it was successful, oh, that's a 1. That's why it's complaining. If it's successful, we want to response redirect, and we want to send it back to the login, which is default ASPX. And for right now, I'm just going to do else label error label dot text equals we could, if we wanted to, it actually, because we're using the stored procedure, it's really hard to get the error. But, you know, with a try catch or something like that. So, does that make sense?
I do have one question.
Sure.
Why did you use on the password, use the confirm text block on the password?
Well, because I assume that so when you've confirmed it, then you know it's valid.
Okay.
If you took it from the password, it might not be. Does that make sense? Because it may not have been confirmed, although it won't let you move forward unless you confirm it, so it really doesn't matter.
Okay.
Other questions? So I assigned all of these text boxes to variables, and then I just passed the variables in here. If you wanted to be more efficient, I don't know if it's more efficient, you could pass the text box itself, the text from the text box directly. So you could say user text box dot text, first name text box dot text. You could do that. I think it's less readable that way. All right, let's try this. Are you guys ready? Do you need some? So I'm going to run it with luck. So let's think of a name for somebody other than Joe User. Anybody have a good name for a username? Tony. So let's say Tony, what would the last name be? And I'll do that as part of the username. Tony Montana. All right, so we'll do the first name is Tony. Last name is Montana. Email is going to be Tony Montana at, let's just do msn.com, although I don't think there is an MSN anymore. It's all Outlook. Password, we'll do Tony Pass. And I will match that. And I'm going to submit, and with luck, we'll go to the login page. So it was, did I do caps on Tony Montana?
Yeah.
And the pass was lowercase. Although, so, yeah, so it was Tony Pass. Now it says invalid login.
That's it.
Yours was confirmed? Did I do my password wrong? I think I did. I think I did an at. I'm so used to doing an at for. Yes. The other thing you can do, and we've only got one more part of this and we'll be done. The other part you can do is if you go to the Server Explorer and you look at the tables for the book review, so I have to get over so I can to send those. And so we added a new reviewer. So I'm just going to click on that and say show table data. And there's the very last. There aren't very many reviewers at this point, but notice Tony Montana, Tony Montana, Tony Montana, etc. And it did hash the password by using the stored procedure. The hash goes on forever. But yeah. So it worked. Did yours work? Sure. So let's go back to here. What kind of error did you get?
Somehow the result, end result, and, oh, okay. I think it was.
It did work. Other questions? Yeah.
How do I get them into validator? Sorry, that does that work?
How do we get the what?
To change what requirement.
Oh, so do take properties or get the stuff done? You want to get the okay, so there's one last piece that we need to do, which is to just see the, once we log in, just see what donation, actually we have to do the donation, right? So we log in and go do the donation. Are we going to get there today? Maybe. We'll be 99% there. Are you guys ready to move forward or not? This is a lot, and I will help you a lot to finish this. So I'm going to, the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the default ASPX. I'm going to add another link button, and this one will be to donate. How do I want to do this? Well, maybe actually what we'll do is just in the CS. Instead of saying welcome, what we'll do is, and this is not how I would make the actual website work, response, redirect, and what I'm going to do is donate ASPX. And we'll make that page. It doesn't exist yet. So if they successfully log in, we're going to throw them to the donate. Does that make sense? Again, I wouldn't do this in real life. In real life, I think if they successfully log in, I'd take them to a menu of options that they could do. Does that make sense? All right, so do you need a minute with that? Just under the session, I did response redirect. It's important that it's under the session, otherwise the session will never happen. And we'll do that donate page, and I think we can do the last two things. I know this is a lot. This is a big assignment. There's a lot of moving pieces. So I'm hoping that what we're doing in class here can serve as a template. It'll be pretty close what you're doing there. Actually, it's not donate. What are we doing here? Because donate is community assist, so it's not here. What are we doing? Are we going to add a review? Yeah, so what do we want to do with the, we've already done the registration. I guess so. I guess we do a review. A review is going to be a pain though. Maybe just add an author. How about that?
Once they've registered, it just goes back to the blog.
Yeah, right, that's what I wanted it to do.
And then it says once they have donated, redirect them to another page that lists all their donations.
Right. So we'll do this a little bit different. Let's do an author rather than a full. The main reason is that if you're entering a review, you're going to have to select an author. You're going to have to select a book, right? There's a whole bunch of stuff that you're going to have to do that can get really complicated. And I do think I have it on my blog somewhere how to do all that, but just for speed, we'll just have them enter an author. All right, so that's all they'll do. And then we'll go and we'll list all the authors. And we'll, for whatever bizarre reason, we'll make it so they can only see the authors if they're logged in. That's not a logical thing, but it'll show you what you need to do. So basically, so I changed that to author. I got my assignments mixed up there. So I'm going to go to solution, and right under the at the project level there, I'm going to add a new web form, and I'm going to call it author. And I don't think there's a lot to enter for author, but for what it's worth, the donation isn't going to require much either, because they're already logged in. Automatically add the date and time if you want. You can actually just have a thing where you put the amount of the donation. Right, that you really only need one text box when you do the donation. So this is author, right? I'm going to just put author here. And I'm going to say like a H1, add author. And then I'm going to look real quickly at the Server Explorer because I don't remember what fields are in author. There's just the author name. So that's really, I'm just going to make this a P. Author name, and then I'm just going to get a text box from the toolbox. And I'll call it author text box. And then on the next line, I'm just going to do a P, and I'm going to just put a button there. They're up in the B's. Okay, there they are, button. It's really hard to see what you're doing unless you pin that there. So, and I'll just call this, I'll call it a submit button. Each page is isolated from every other page, so the fact that I named a submit button in the other doesn't affect this page. And I'll just say submit. All right, so this is even uglier. I didn't use a table, but there it is. Add author, author name, submit. Your donation page is going to be almost as simple because it's just enter your donation amount and then submit it. One thing you're going to have to do at the donation page is you'll have to do like double dot parse because it's a string and you're going to have to convert it to a double. Does that make sense? Get to a money, or decimal dot parse perhaps. So I'm going to double click the submit button. Why is it not going there? There it goes. So I'm the same things. So I'm going to close this now. What do we need to do? So it's book review DB entities. You don't have to call it DB. So I'm making the connection. Now, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to add author. So I'm going to say author. Let's just make it A equals new author. So again, the objects, the tables in the database are in there. Right? What does it not like about author? A equals new author. Seems to be happy. I don't know. The green underline means we haven't used it. So I'm going to say A dot Why is it not showing me? Well, yeah, but it should show me the name. It should show me dot author name, but it's not showing me the fields for the author. And it should. Oh, I know why. Anybody know why? So I named the page author. I'm going to change that to author page, although if I do that, I have to go back to the ASPX source and change this to author page, and this to author page. Actually, I think I can leave that. I probably just screwed that up. It might even be faster just to make a new page, but inherit code file, I think is still author, but I made this author page as the name, and then author page here, and then it's happy, and when I do a dot, I can get the author name. I don't think there's anything else under author. There's the books that they write, but we're not going to worry about that. Okay. When you do this with other things, it has, when you do the A here for the book, the data thing here, it'll have a list of all the fields that belong in it, and you can assign values to them. What I did, and this is a warning to you because it's something I should have thought about. If you name this the same, if you name any two things the same, it'll get confused. Does that make sense? So when I changed this to author page, I had to go back to author ASPX and say that it inherits author page. This is the class name. It has to be the same class. Right, so I changed the class name to author page, and the other one I had to change it here too. If you don't, then they won't recognize each other. They won't see each other. This I didn't have to do because it's not exactly the same because it has the ASPX CS. Right, it's not the same as just author. I could change it if I want, but then I'd have to change more stuff. So I just wanted to change the minimum. Does that change make sense? I know it's confusing. I guess the only good thing to learn about that is you brain gone. Don't name things the same. So there's one last piece I need to do here. So I'm going to do db.authors, add, and I'm going to add our A, right, the author we just made. And then I'm going to do db save changes. And that will cause it to save any changes we made. It'll cause it to save the author. If you were editing, it's still just save changes. Right? I could show you that at some point. There's one other thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it up here. If session, what did we name our session? Is it username? User key? Whoa. And I'm going to change that to lower cases because I think that's how I did it. This session name needs to match what's under default. So it's user key with a capital K. For me, make sure it matches what you did. So I'm going to say if it equals null, so if it doesn't exist, I'm going to redirect it back to default to login. So basically that says if the session variable isn't there, when the page loads, if the session variable isn't there, it'll throw you back to the login. Okay, I'm not sure if we'll get the very last part done or not, but we're really close. You want to try this one? Do you need a minute or you got it? And I will post all this, of course. So don't panic. I know that this can cause panic. I'm going to execute this. And since I'm executing on this page, there shouldn't be any session variable. It's going to throw me back to the login. So, oh, I didn't. Maybe my variable name is still there. The session name survives for a while. I don't know a way to eliminate the session variable. It lasts for just a few minutes. And I guess we did it, but let's do an author. I don't know who's in the database. I don't want to add one that's already in the database.
John saying that
What?
the read file.
What? I just want a new name. So if I submit that, right now nothing will happen, right? But we can go and look and see if it's there. I didn't clear out the text box or anything, all of which I could do. I just want to look in the database and see if it actually wrote that. Yep, it wrote it. Algernon Blackwood. Okay, so that worked. Questions on that? Does that make sense? It's not a lot of code, particularly since there's no fields in author. You might have a lot more if there were more fields, right? But typically what you do is you create an instance of that database, the object that it created from the database table. You populate all the fields, right? You give values to all the fields, which you can get by doing the dot. It'll give you the IntelliSense for what the fields are. Then you add it to the collection of authors. Author is one author. This is a collection of authors, of rows of authors. And then you save the changes. That's sort of the pattern. I'm going to, once this is done, I'm going to redirect this. And this will be the very last part. And I'm going to, what do I want to call this? I'm going to call it author list.aspx. Doesn't exist yet. I'm going to add it. And this should only take, I hope, a second to do, because we're at noon. So when we successfully add an author, we're going to go to another page. So let me do this, I think, really quick. I'm going to add another page, a web form. I'm going to call it author list. I'm going to do OK. And just for speed, I'm going to really quickly add a, down from data, I'm going to get a data grid, or grid view rather. Can't drag it where I want when I do that. I'm just going to drag a grid view on there. I'm not even going to name it. I am going to go into, I'm just going to right click and go to the code, view code. So I'm going to do book review, DB entities, DB equals new, book review, DB entities. I am going to do a query. So I'm going to do var authors. I actually can't call it that, so let's call it auths. Equals from a in db dot authors. I think I can get away with just saying select a. And I'm going to try, let's put this in parentheses. I don't know if I may have to do something more elaborate, but I'm hoping it'll be this simple. I'm going to do dot to list. And then I'm going to do grid view one dot data source equals auths. Grid view one dot data source, or not data source, data bind. If I'm lucky, that's all I have to do. I'm just selecting everything.
What did you put in the outer list? Can you
What?
show the outer list again?
Say what?
Can you show the outer list? Full page outer?
Oh, the author list ASPX.
So what's this?
I just did the grid view, which is if you go down, there's data, it's right above the validation.
Okay.
And you click the little triangle to open it, and it's the grid view. And I didn't name it, I just left it. I'm going to,
You went to the page load, right? That's where you put the
and I put the code in the page load.
Okay.
So author list, I'm going to see if it will load. This should load all by itself because I didn't put the if session variable was there. I just want to make sure it works, because if it doesn't, I have to adapt it really quickly. Yes, it worked. It's ugly, but it worked. So what we have now is we should be able to log in, register, log in, come add an author, and come here, right, to see all the authors. Let me run through that real quickly from like the default. Let's register. I'm going to go back to default, which isn't up there. And I'll run through it all, and then I'll post it all on GitHub. So right now I'm just going to go here. This should be, so I'm going to register, and I need a name other than Tony Montana. Let's do something simple. I'm not sure I actually have a John Doe, so let's do John Doe as a user. John Doe. johndoe@gmail.com. And I will say John Pass caps. I'm doing John. So it should take me to a submit, and then I will do John Doe, John Pass. No. I'm going to enter an author. I know lots of authors. I should just be able to think of one out there. She writes really good fantasy novels. Submit, and there she is. So it all works. And I'd be willing to bet most of yours probably don't work all the way through, but that's. I'm going to upload them all to here. And we will go over it again right at the beginning of class on Thursday, but I also will give you an open lab where I come around and help you. And if it takes a little longer, that's fine. We'll get you through it. It's a lot, I know. So let me real quickly just stop this from running. And I'm going to see if I can. Am I logged in? Upload files. Yep, I'm logged in. Choose my files. So I don't need these. Nothing's changed there, but I do need. It was on the desktop, wasn't it? This time. So we got author. There were changes in all of these, I think, so I'm going to copy all of those up. I don't know if there was any changes in the binary files. Yes. So let's go in here, upload files, and I'm going to do the to script manager. Something went really wrong and we can't process that file. I wonder if I could drag them in. No, it doesn't like those two files. Okay. There they are. Okay, so then I need to create another folder.
So if I do the homework on that, different computer.
You should be able to, although you might have to change. There's a slight chance that you would have to change the server. It actually should work. It should work. If you're using, so we're using localhost. If you're using SQL Express, you might have to, I think I closed it. But in the web config, there's a connection string. And down here, where if I go in here far enough, I guess let me see if I can get it in the Visual Studio. Well, actually, maybe just right here. I just want to do it in Notepad. So when we get to connection strings, there's a place where it says provider. Okay, and then connections, data source, localhost. You might have to change that to /SQL Express if that's what you're using. If you don't want to change it there, you can delete the data entities and just run the wizard again. Right, because the thing is that this provider localhost might be different if you run it on your own machine. And that's in the web config file. It's a bit of a pain to find, but
Yeah. And then to run the wizard again, you use the community assist.
yeah, use community assist. In fact, we haven't run the community assist wizard, so if you're doing it at home, that's what you're doing anyway. And just use the, if you have SQL Express, use the localhost, do SQL Express.
Does the community assist have the stored procedures as well?
It does. It has, so it's exactly like that. It has a login store procedure and it has a new register. Yeah, register store procedure. So it's exactly like that, except the fields in the register, there's more fields. So I will give, as I said, don't panic. I just uploaded it all on GitHub. And it should, we'll talk through it a little bit and I'll give you lots of time to work on it. And I was going to get you set up the last little bit, but if you need to go, we can do it next time.
Yeah, we can do it.
Okay.
Actually, so we would like to take the first.
Okay.
It was conflict in the schedule, but I met